Well, welcome to another Friday night. As we continue our reparenting series, one of the big challenges in parenting is being a very consistent parent yourself, but also training your children to become very consistent in their lives. And that is a real challenge. And then when it comes to reparenting ourselves in recovery, to me, it's one of the very important foundational attitudes that a person needs if they're going to recover. Recovery is not about doing recovery good once in a while. It's about consistently doing the healthy stuff every day. And that is super, super challenging for people from complex trauma. And so part of what the focus I've been looking at is there's a lot of stuff out right now on recovery tools, and they're excellent tools. But what I want to add to the discussion is that there has to be some underneath attitudes, that if you don't have those attitudes, you just don't get to recovery. And so we've talked about commitment. We've talked about courage. Today I want to talk about consistency. So a definition of consistency is constantly following the same principles or course of action in all circumstances, regardless of how I feel. The practice of regularly and reliably doing the same actions or maintaining the same behaviors over time. So it's doing the healthy thing, the right thing, day after day, regardless of how I feel. That is consistency. That is vital if one is going to get healthy, if one is going to recover. So it's not thinking that if I do the right thing once or twice, that's going to be good enough. No, it's doing the right thing once or twice does not make a difference. You have to consistently do it. Persist at doing it, even when you don't feel like it. So it's hanging in there, continuing to do the right thing when life gets hard, when life gets overwhelming, when everything in you wants to go back to fight, flight, or freeze. That is the key to recovery. So another way to say that is that recovery consistency is learning to live out of your cortex brain. It is not being controlled by the limbic brain, which is all about instant gratification, all about only doing stuff if I feel like it, only doing stuff if it makes me feel good. Because if you live out of your limbic brain, there will not be consistency. It will follow this graph. You will be very committed at times when you feel like it, when your limbic brain is activated and wants to do something. But as soon as the limbic brain doesn't feel like doing something, then you'll go to the other extreme and not do stuff. So consistency isn't necessarily that you do stuff perfectly, but it's that you are there doing it repeatedly over and over again. And so that means not being controlled by the limbic brain. That means getting out of the limbic brain to the cortex. And that is what is healthy, what is loving, what is I need to do because of long-term positive consequences. I will do that every day, regardless of how my limbic brain is feeling on any given day. That limbic brain is no longer going to be running the ship here. It's not going to be in the driver's seat. Cortex is going to listen to it, is going to know what's going on in the limbic brain, but then it's going to make decisions not based on the limbic brain, but based on what is healthy. So just let me tell you a story about a lady that was a role model for me for many years, had a huge impact on my life. This was a lady who is very shy, never in the public eye very often, but yet she helped thousands of people. And to me, was one of the most amazing role models that a person could have. And that, as I've thought about it over the years, is because she lived out of her cortex. So this lady had 4 children. And so you can imagine 4 children who were all close in age when they were young, very energetic children. So you're trying to manage 4 children, run a household, take care of responsibilities outside of the household, very busy life. So there's going to be ups and downs. There's going to be good days. There's going to be bad days. There's going to be days where you're struggling with problems. There's going to be days where you're sad. There's going to be days where you're angry about some injustice or being hurt. What was fascinating to me about this woman is even on those days when her limbic brain was triggered by pain, by hurt, by anger, by fear, she was still present to her children. She still treated everybody with respect. She still did what was loving. She still was there in a way that was present, that was kind, that was consistent. Didn't matter what was going on in her limbic brain. The cortex, what is loving, what is healthy, guided this person, and they lived out of that consistently. And because of that, all 4 of those children grew up to be people that really respected her, were quite healthy in their own lives, and there was dividends that were huge. And then she helped thousands of people behind the scenes. And so that, to me, is what we're talking about. That consistently showing up with love, respect, healthy living every day, regardless of what is going on in your limbic brain. So the key elements to all of this is there's got to be a regularity. You got to do stuff every day. You got to learn to be reliable because others are depending on you. And you got to align your life with the right goals and values. As you do that, then you are consistent. So let me give you some very practical kind of examples of how this works out in society and how you begin to see the importance of consistency. Most of you know that, or know somebody, or have been there yourself, where you've wanted to lose weight and you've gone on a weight loss program. The problem is that lost weight seems to find you again after a little while. The reality is that 95% of people that go on weight loss programs, it doesn't work for them. And part of that is because they do it out of their limbic brain. They do it at first because, I'm overweight. I don't like myself. I need to lose weight. Their limbic brain's all fired up with fear and anger and self-hatred. And so they do it until their limbic brain doesn't feel like it anymore. And they stop. They don't stick at it. They're not consistent. Another one is January. People come through Christmas, brand new year. Everybody signs up for gym memberships, exercise programs. They're going to get in shape. They're going to start being disciplined and get a good exercise regimen. And thousands and thousands sign up. A couple months later, they stop going to the gym. There's not a consistency. They start great, but they don't finish. They don't continue. But then think of it in terms of you going out to a restaurant. If you went to a restaurant and 1 week the food was excellent, the next week the food was terrible, and you began to realize that the food at this restaurant is not consistently high quality, after a while you just stop going to the restaurant. You go, no, I want a restaurant that gives me consistent high quality food. That is an expectation. That's what we want. That's what we need. And then I have had so many people over the years that have come into recovery gangbusters. They are going to work so hard, and they do, for about 3 months, 6 months. And then they stop being consistent in their recovery regimen. They stop doing the things that were necessary to help them get clean and sober, to get on the right track, to get their kids back, to stay out of prison. All of those things, they just stop doing them. And before you know it, they've slid back into all their old ways of living. So if a person's going to get recovery, they gotta be consistent. And then I look at marriage, parenting. What does a good marriage require? Consistently treating the other person with respect, consistently being present, consistently loving, consistently being vulnerable and open, consistently all of those necessary qualities that you do consistently. It's not good enough to do them once or twice a week, and then the rest of the time you just let whatever goes, goes. You got to do it consistently. So intimate, healthy relationships only get there by consistently applying love and healthy tools. The same with parenting. I have had so many people come into recovery, so out of prison, out of addiction, out of just very messed up lives, and they are driven into recovery because they're losing their kids. And now they want to be a good parent, and they are motivated to be a good parent, and they work hard to be a good parent. And they do it, but they don't do it consistently. They're really good on the weekend. But then during the week, they want to be with their buddies. They want to be doing their old activities. They neglect the kids during the week, but on the weekend, they're just hyper alert to their kids, hyper attentive to their kids. And I go, that's not good parenting. You can't look at how you are on the weekend and say, see, I'm a good parent. You got to be able to be a good parent every day. And if you're not, then you're wounding your children. You're creating a complex trauma environment for your children. So if you look at all of life, basically what you begin to realize is it's only when we consistently follow healthy tools, loving perspective and values that you end up with a healthy relationship, healthy people, healthy society. But you got to do it consistently. It's not just about having all the right rules. It's not just about having all the right tools. It's consistently applying them. Just a couple quotes. Marie Forleo. Success doesn't come from what you do occasionally. It comes from what you do consistently. And then Tony Robbins says, it's not what we do once in a while that shapes our lives. It's what we do consistently. Then Anonymous, it's not about perfect. It's about effort. And when you bring that effort every single day, that's where transformation happens. That's how change occurs. Consistently bringing effort every single day. So let's bring all of this to complex trauma and see that consistency is not part of complex trauma. It's consistent only in that it provides an unsafe environment. But all of the healthy consistency, healthy love, healthy tools, healthy connection, healthy presence is not there. So complex trauma is a child growing up in inconsistency in all the areas that should be consistent and consistency in areas that should be absent. So many grew up where boundaries were inconsistent. The rules changed depending on dad's mood or mom's mood. Mom were being basically living out of their limbic brain. And so the rules were changing all the time. The consequences were changing. How the consequences were applied were changing all the time. So inconsistent. You didn't know where you stood on any given day. You didn't know what to expect on any given day because there was no consistency. So there was an element of chaos, unpredictability that was just part of growing up in complex trauma. And then complex trauma is a parent who is sometimes present, sometimes connected to the child, but not consistently. A parent who sometimes met the needs of the child, but not consistently. And so the child felt neglected. The child felt alone. The child didn't know what to expect. The child tried to meet their own needs. All of those things are trauma comes out of the inconsistency of the parents meeting the child's needs, being present and connecting. And then parents weren't consistent in how they lived. They talked one thing and lived another. Some days they were very loving. Some days they weren't loving. Some days they were attentive. Some days they were neglectful. Some days they were angry. Some days they were sweet. Their parents changed all the time. And then their parents weren't consistent in how they managed their emotions. So parent could get angry. Nobody else could. Some days the parent would bite their tongue, especially if their friends were around and they wouldn't show their anger. But if there was nobody around, it was just the kids and the spouse, then the parent got super angry and just flew off the handle and threw things and hit things. And so there was no consistency and managing emotions. And then parents weren't consistent in how they loved each other. Sometimes they were super sweet to each other. Sometimes they just fought. Sometimes they hit each other. Sometimes they didn't talk to each other. There was constant tension. Inconsistent. And so complex trauma is all about inconsistency, about all of the important love elements of a healthy life. It results in unpredictability, in chaos, in constant crisis, in consistent danger. That's complex trauma. So if a child grows up in that, I just want to make an observation. What that feels like for a child when they actually then end up in consistency can feel boring for them. So just be aware of that in recovery, that as soon as you start working towards being consistent, it can actually trigger something in you that says, this feels boring. I want to go back to crisis and chaos. There's one other element that I want you to see here. So a child naturally is in their limbic brain, but then a child in danger growing up into teen years and adult years remains in their limbic brain because of danger. So they're not growing and transitioning to living out of their cortex. They're staying with the limbic brain being the most powerful part of the brain that's in the driver's seat. And so they grow up with, I want instant protection. I want instant gratification. I only do stuff if I feel like it. My feelings determine everything. That becomes their controlling force in their life. So the limbic brain becomes a very detrimental piece for them in getting healthy because it keeps them inconsistent themselves. They grew up in inconsistency. They hate inconsistency. But that kept them in their limbic brain. And now in adult life, they continue to live out of their limbic brain and they end up being inconsistent, the very thing that they hate. So let me go back to developing consistency and the importance of it. So just think of any skill that's going to lead to long-term success. So let's start with Aristotle, the Greek philosopher. He said to be great in some area, whether a soldier, athlete, musician, there are certain muscles one needs to train. There are certain habits they must adopt, and those habits must become second nature. So in other words, in order to become great at anything, you got to learn certain skills, certain tools, and you got to repeat practice those tools over and over and over and over until they become second nature, until they become part of your subconscious that you can just do it. So you consistently practice. And the consistency of practicing the same healthy tools over and over leads to long-term success. I remember when I was young and just started watching the Olympics, there was a real crisis almost because all of a sudden, Japanese wrestlers were defeating American wrestlers. And it was, why is this happening? America is supposed to be kind of the greatest wrestlers. And so they studied the Japanese wrestlers. And what they saw was they would do the same maneuver, the same action over and over. So somebody would come up behind them, touch them on the shoulder, and they would immediately go into their response. And they would do it thousands and thousands of times until they did it automatically. They didn't have to think about it anymore when they were on the mat. They just did it. And that was that consistent practice of the necessary responses that helped them just to get in the zone when they're on the mat. So I have had the privilege of working with a number of different athletes. And so what I've begun to realize is many athletes become good because they train their body and they consistently develop skills and practice and practice and practice. But some of those athletes are good, but they don't go to the next level. And that's because they don't also train their mind and their soul. And I've talked to one athlete who said, and he was world champion. And basically he said he's dealt with so many athletes have tremendous potential, tremendous skill, tremendous ability, but they never make it to the next level because they never deal with their trauma. They never deal with their underlying issues. They don't train their soul to get to their parasympathetic nervous system. They just stay in their sympathetic nervous system. And so they don't get healthy in their person. They just try to have healthy tools. And I think that's an amazing way of looking at it, because that's what we teach in dealing with complex trauma. It's not just about learning tools. It's about changing you. That's what athletes are learning. It's not just about learning tools. You got to change you. And so you got to do it consistently. But more than that, when you think of that person, that woman that was a role model to me, you look at her and you go, wow, she had loving character. She was constantly respectful, giving, set consistent boundaries, took care of herself, met her 12 needs, met the needs of those closest to her every single day. So when you go to build healthy character qualities, how do you do it? It doesn't just magically fall from the sky. It doesn't just happen through 3 easy steps and then you've got it and you're good to go. No, you got to choose to do it and then repeat it again and again, every day, hundreds of times a day, until it becomes part of who you are, until it becomes your nature. That's what this woman did. That's how we become healthy. That's how we become people of the character that we respect. They had to make choices hundreds and hundreds of times, repeat those choices in difficult situations. Do you realize it's really easy to be loving when you feel like being loving, when it's easy to be loving? But to be loving, truly loving, when loving is part of your character, is you choose to be loving when you don't feel like it. You choose to be loving when you're tired. You choose to be loving when you're angry. You choose to be respectful when that person has just hurt you. You repeat it. You make choices that you repeat and repeat until it becomes part of who you are. And so you don't become healthy through 3 easy steps. That's what everybody wishes for. They want a magic bullet. It's consistent hard work. Now let me just come back to parenting, because to me this is so essential. If you look at, we talk all the time about what meeting our children's needs, providing a safe environment, all of those things that are so necessary for parenting. What's all of that imply? It implies that you consistently make a child feel safe every single day. You consistently set boundaries that make the child feel safe, that make the child know what's healthy, what's unhealthy, that make the child know who's safe, who's not safe. You consistently provide a stable environment. You consistently model healthy lifestyle. You consistently act in a way that the child knows you're trustworthy. You consistently are available to connect. You're consistently attuned to the child. You're consistently meeting the child's needs. A child will only respect you if you're consistent. A child will only feel healthy and safe if you are consistently doing all of these things. If you're not, they begin to see you as a hypocrite. So if you're like me, you're sitting there going, wow, this consistency stuff is important, but oh, is it hard? And it gets even harder in parenting, because it's not just that you're consistent in an environment that you create that then stays stable. It's that you have to be consistent with children that are constantly changing, children that are going through stuff, children that are somewhat unpredictable at times, children that are unstable because of what they're going through at school, what they're going through with siblings, what they're going through in their own body. And so you are consistent with ongoing challenges constantly because your children are going through their stuff. And so consistency for you is learning for you to regulate your emotions, be a co-regulator to your child who is going up and down, and consistently being that co-regulator who's regulated. That is so challenging. So if you aren't consistent, so think back to a child in complex trauma where dad wasn't consistent, mom wasn't consistent. The child's brain is so committed to survive. Here's what it begins to do. It begins to look for patterns in dad. Early warning sign that dad's going to come home drunk. Early warning sign that dad's going to lose it and become super angry. Early warning signs that tension is building and things are going to get nasty. Their radar starts to get highly tuned to early warning signs. But then what begins to happen is they learn how to play that. So they begin to learn, okay, dad's building in anger. Let's stay away from dad. But, dad's in a really good mood today. Let's use that. So let's go ask dad for $10. Let's go ask dad to take us out for ice cream. So they begin to learn how to manipulate all of that. And that creates problems for them. The next thing that I want you to see is consistency includes self-control, self-discipline, perseverance. So my limbic brain, I'm not going to let it take over. I'm going to go back to, no, here's what my cortex knows is healthy. I'm going to force myself to do it even though I don't feel like it. I'm going to stick at this even though I want to quit. So I persevere. I discipline my limbic brain. I discipline my impulsive responses that are what my limbic brain wants to do. So there's an element of self-control and self-discipline that becomes part of this. Just something that should be obvious, but I need to just highlight it, is consistency is only a positive thing when we consistently do the right thing, when we consistently do what is in line with love and what is healthy. If we consistently do what is unhealthy, what is unloving, we're doing a ton of damage to ourselves and to others. So consistency is only a virtue, only a wonderful thing when it is connected to love and healthy living. And the final thing I want to say about this is consistency does not mean perfection. So remember that inconsistent up and down line. Consistency isn't a straight, perfect line. I'm doing consistently good, but not perfect. Consistently the best that I can, but not necessarily perfect. As I consistently work at stuff, I get better and better, but I never totally reach perfection. Let me add just something that I think as an aside here that is important. I want to go back to how many people come into recovery and they don't realize that they're actually doing it out of their limbic brain. So they get into recovery because their limbic brain gets into a whole bunch of pain. They lose their kids, they lose their job, their marriage falls apart, their health is falling apart, there's constant fighting. Everything is really getting more and more painful. And so all of a sudden I got to change. And so I'm going to diet, I'm going to exercise, I'm going to deal with my addiction, I'm going to get into trauma recovery because their world's falling apart. And they are super motivated and they work hard and they are disciplined. Why? Because their limbic brain wants to be, because their limbic brain wants to get rid of the pain. But as soon as the pain decreases, they take their foot off the gas. As soon as the routine of this new life that's getting them healthy and that they're consistently doing, it starts to feel boring, they take their foot off the gas. As soon as they start doing this healthy stuff and they're starting to meet their needs, all of these unmet, painful emotions start to rise to the surface. The very things that they were using drugs and all of their distractions and old behaviors to try to medicate, now that they're getting healthy, they don't have all the tools yet to deal with that stuff. And so they're starting to feel all this pain again. And they go, oh, let's go back to the old tools. Limbic brain, limbic brain, limbic brain. And so what I hope you see clearly is that you might start recovery in your limbic brain, but if you don't get to doing recovery out of your cortex, your recovery is not going to stick at it. You're going to do it until something happens that is more painful in your limbic brain that's going to make you go back. There's another piece that needs to be added here, and that is just realizing that we all have challenges to being consistent. Being consistent is hard. There's things that work against being consistent. So I'll give you some examples. I'm great at being consistent when I'm alert and energetic, but when I'm tired and stressed and sick, I don't want to be consistent. When I'm depressed, I don't want to be consistent. I just want to crawl in a hole and isolate. When I'm stuck in a dark place in my head with fear or anxiety or depression or negative thinking, I don't want to be consistent. When I'm full of shame and beating myself up, I'm not wanting to be consistent. And then for some people from complex trauma, when I get feeling really good and I'm in a really, really positive limbic brain space where I'm on top of the world, I don't want to be consistent. I just want to go out and be impulsive. When I'm discontent, I don't want to be consistent. I'm just antsy. I just can't settle. When I lack clear goals and clear priorities, I'm not good at being consistent. I'm bouncing all around trying all these different things. If I'm perfectionistic, I'm not good at being consistent because I'm just trying to be perfect in one area and I'm slipping in all kinds of other areas. When I haven't dealt with my trauma and my addiction to chaos and distractions, when I'm still looking to medicate all of my emptiness inside with distractions and process addictions and drug addictions, I'll never be consistent because the addiction becomes a priority in life, not consistency. If I don't have a purpose in life, I lack motivation, and then I'm not consistent. If I have unrealistic expectations for myself, I have trouble being consistent. And so I need to be aware if those things are happening in my life that it's going to threaten my ability to be consistent. I need to work extra hard to get into my cortex, that those things are putting me into my limbic brain. Those things are making my limbic brain want to gain power and take over. So just be aware of that. So let's end with how do we grow in becoming consistent? Many people think it's just greater self-discipline, that you drive yourself. You don't have fun. You don't have balance in your life. You just force yourself to do stuff. And I go, no. I need to find the balance between fun and serious. I need to find the balance between being in my sympathetic and my parasympathetic. I need to meet all of my 12 needs. So consistency isn't about driving myself. Consistency is about finding balance in life. That is so essential. And so as I find balance, as my needs are met, as I have the right amount of rest and the right amount of work, then I have the energy. I'm not driven by this emptiness and discontent inside. Then I can create consistency. So find that healthy balance. If you fail, don't get down on yourself. If you have a day where you aren't consistent, don't beat yourself up. Go, okay, what can I learn from this? What could I have done differently? And get back up and try again. And each time you do, you're going to learn more tools and keep growing. Understand that being consistent requires boundaries. I can't consistently do the right thing if I'm saying yes to everybody else's request. If I'm letting everybody into my life that wants to come into my life, I have to say no to the request of others in order to do what is most important for myself. So I have to get good at boundaries. Next, I'm not going to be consistent unless I know what is healthy, what is loving, what is my life purpose, what do I want to be doing. So I need to Take time to sort out, what am I here for? What do I want to be giving my life to? What matters to me? What are the priorities of my life? What relationships matter the most? What do I need to invest the most time into? I need to sort that out. I think it is so helpful to have a role model in your life like I had, that models consistency, that gives you up close and personal a picture of what consistency looks like. That is so helpful. But then understand that recovery is a marathon, not a sprint. It is not a quick little fix and all of a sudden I'm going to be healthy and all of a sudden everything's going to be good. No, it is doing the same healthy things over and over, day after day, year after year. And I have to accept that this is a long, long journey. And that then means that there's a power to a routine that is healthy. That I need to get up every day and develop a routine that meets my 12 needs. I need to spend time meditating. I need to spend time in mindfulness. I need to ground myself. I need to do inventories. I need to feed my soul. I need to feed my need for beauty. I need to connect. On and on. I need to develop a routine that every day makes sure those needs get met. Physical needs, emotional needs, intellectual needs, relational needs, spiritual needs, all of my needs. That becomes my routine. And as I do it, that routine becomes second nature. And as I then do it, it actually leads to a joy. I do it automatically. I want to do it. It becomes part of my life. The next thing is part of consistency is developing tools to regulate my limbic brain, my emotions. So when my limbic brain gets triggered and it wants to dysregulate, I'm able to ground myself, to regulate it back, to get me back into my cortex. Learning those regulation tools is essential in being consistent. With that is that mindfulness, taking time every day to get quiet, taking time every day to do an inventory of how am I doing physically, intellectually, emotionally, spiritually, relationally, listening to my body, going inside and being aware of what is going on. And that's being aware of where's my limbic brain at? How activated is it in different areas? That doesn't mean it's going to take over and get in the driver's seat, but I need to be aware of it. And then keep growing and learning about what's healthy look like, what's loving look like. Practice every day doing healthy things, doing loving things, so that it becomes part of who you are. Many people find accountability is helpful in growing in consistency. So it's telling a friend, hey, I'm going to walk for 5 miles every day. I'm going to read for 20 minutes every day. I'm going to meditate. Would you check in with me? I need to be accountable to somebody. That helps with accountability. And then finally, I would say a couple times a week, push yourself to do something healthy that you don't feel like doing. So, you know what? I should just sit and read. I don't feel like reading. Well, I'm going to force myself to read. That just, again, overcomes some of that limbic brain pull, and it strengthens the muscle of the cortex that I am going to do what is healthy even when I don't feel like it. So I hope you see the importance of consistency. I hope you see some tools and a path to growing in consistency in your life. And again, I just hope this helps you become a healthier person and a healthier parent. So thank you again for being with us. If this was helpful, like, subscribe.